Welcome back. You are listening to the Mid-Morning Talk on Salamida with me, Mari Mukunda. It is time for our segment with the Islamic Care Line, and today we are talking about defensive behavior, what it is and what it looks like. We're all wired to protect ourselves, and this can lead to defensive behavior. But if you find that either you or your partner is always on guard, waiting on the front lines to pounce into a defensive mode of communicating, it can be deeply harmful to the relationship. And we sometimes hear these words are, why are you being so defensive, or stop being so defensive. And do we stop and ponder on what was said to us, like, was I really being defensive, or am I so defensive? Anyway, to help us understand it further, we have Islamic Care Line's social worker Shuhaida Adam. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shuhaida, shukran for joining me once again. And let me just get straight into it. Defensive behavior. What is it and what causes it?
Walaikum salam. Walaikum salam. No, wonderful to always discuss these matters and helping our listeners to understand what causes us to tick, what causes people to tick. So let's talk defensive behavior. And I'm sure, like you said, many people have heard that phrase, you're becoming defensive. Why are you so defensive? What is it? So look, generally, people, and even the aim of our profession, working in the helping profession, the aim of therapy, we want people to be able to function optimally, right? So that is the aim of all our interventions, people to function optimally. There are then certain maladaptive behaviors that impact on our ability to function optimally. So something like defense mechanisms. It's an unconscious strategy to protect ourselves from something unpleasant. Usually, this unpleasant thing that we're protecting ourselves from is relating to a relationship. So it's connecting with somebody else. Oftentimes, the person who's employing a defense mechanism is basically saying, I don't like what you are talking to me about. I don't like being confronted about this situation, this issue, or whatever it is that we are talking about. Okay? So, I mean, we can say that sort of in a nutshell. I don't like it, and please stop it, and you have no right to talk to me about it. So some people can take it a little bit further, and they can then turn that defensiveness and become a bit more aggressive towards the person. They can become authoritative, telling the person that you have no right to talk to me about this. Okay, so the takeaway message is that this confrontation that is what the person finds unacceptable. So don't call me out about this, or there's something that I'm not happy about and I can't confront you about it. So I'm going to use certain other behaviors because I cannot resolve the difficulty and the anxiety and the trauma associated with what is causing this stress within me. If I give you some examples, I think people will find it a lot more easier to understand. So, because it's unconscious, if you tell somebody don't become defensive, this person will most likely tell you, I'm not being defensive. It's something in therapy we don't recommend anybody say you're getting defensive, because the person cannot actually relate to what are you talking about. We don't recognize that we are employing defensive behavior. Okay, let me give you some examples, right? And we've identified just 10 types of defense mechanisms that people use. These are the 10 most common ones. The first one, we look at projection. So when you are attributing your feelings or thoughts onto somebody else. For example, if you are constantly criticizing somebody about a certain quality or a trait, it's likely that you actually have that within you and you are struggling with that quality. So a bully may constantly ridicule a child about being slow with reading, for example, when the bully himself is also struggling academically. Okay, so that is called projection. Denial is another one that's very, very common. So refusing to acknowledge the reality around you. because if you recognize this reality, it might lead to anxiety. It leads to facing the fact that you may have messed up. People may hold you in a negative light. Oftentimes, we take on a certain identity, and then when we deny a certain behavior that may change that identity. So, for example, as a parent, a lot of people hold the identity that I am a positive parent or I am a parent in control of my child. And when our child comes with a problem, for example, a child with a learning problem, a child with a behavior problem, a child with a drug problem, we may be in denial because that then impacts on my identity as a functional and a parent who's got it all under control. So that is denial. Repression is another mechanism people use. Simply, we're blocking out the difficult force from entering into our consciousness. Repression, you find it often with people who have experienced a trauma, or even a very tragic experience, so a great loss. We just close it off. Sometimes people go through a great financial loss, and it means a change of lifestyle. So they change their lifestyle, and they do not even think about the actual loss and the previous lifestyle that they had. Then there's regression. You find regression also with a lot of children. Children use this as a defense mechanism when they are experiencing emotional difficulty. Regression is when we revert to behavior or emotions of an earlier developmental stage. So, for example, if a child has already mastered the ability to go to the bathroom on their own, they can maybe tie their shoelaces, they can pronounce certain words clearly, they've learned to do that. And then when the family undergoes a type of a trauma, suddenly the child can't do that anymore. So their behavior is now regressing. Rationalization, that is when we're trying to justify the problem or we're trying to justify your mistake and trying to make it very logical. So if, for example, you dropped the cup because you were, it was too heavy or whatever the case is, and you rationalize it that, well, everybody does it. It's absolutely normal. Okay. So I'm using a bit of a silly example, but it's basically when you're justifying something with logical reasons. Even with behavior, drug behavior. If somebody is using drugs and they're struggling with that, they may say then, well, everybody around me is using it. There's nothing really wrong with it. They're trying to justify it. Displacement is when you redirect an emotional reaction to another person altogether. So that a common one here is when one person, you are upset with your reaction with one person and you take it out on another person. So you then get upset with another person. If a couple is having difficulty and if a couple is having conflict, husband and wife are upset at each other and one parent then takes it out on the child. Or if you are experiencing a lot of difficulty at work and you are upset at your boss, but you cannot confront your boss. So when you come home, you then overreact to your children. So that is displacement. Reaction formation, when you behave in the opposite of your true feelings. Okay. So one example here was if you really dislike a person, but you then decide you want to spend time with him, you find yourself spending time with him, you find yourself forcing behavior to make you like this person. Okay. Sublimation is one where you are channeling what is maybe regarded as unacceptable urges, or some people may experience extreme aggression for some reason within themselves. They don't really act it out towards other people, so they then take it out perhaps in they may take up extreme sports just to help them control that. Okay. Intellectualization is when you focus more on the intellectual outcome of a situation rather than how people may feel. So here's an example that if people are sharing a home and if one person moves out, you say the marriage broke down and one person moves out, and then the remaining partner starts looking at the practical ways that their life is going to change and the financial impact it's going to have, instead of rather looking at how hurt they feel, the emotions they feel, the sense of betrayal, etc. Okay? And incompartmentalization is the last one I'm going to cover, where you completely separate components of your life into different categories to prevent conflicting emotions. These are people who are absolutely able to focus on a certain task at hand. If, for example, let's say again there's conflict at home, but when you come to work, you are absolutely focused on work and you don't even think about the conflict at home. It does not cross your mind. You are able to then compartmentalize. So it is actually a defense mechanism that helps you then function. It helps you not face and confront the unpleasantness of whatever the situation is. So it also, when you in the confrontation, then it helps you get the other person to sort of back off. Okay. So who actually are the people who are most likely to use defensive mechanisms? So these are people they possibly had experienced quite a bit of difficulty in childhood, not necessarily abuse, but perhaps all the parenting needs were not met. Okay, so oftentimes these defense mechanisms are actually developed through childhood, and then it manifests itself in adulthood. So the people who tend to become defensive, they struggle with issues of power and control. Oftentimes they feel that they are being controlled by others, and they struggle with power issues. They may feel that they hold no power in their relationship, they are not being heard, and they then may try to aggressively try and regain power and a sense of control in their lives. They are generally uncomfortable with feelings and managing their own feelings. In general, they are uncomfortable with it. They don't really like to work through emotional issues collaboratively. So together when two people are having a problem, a defensive person doesn't necessarily want to work together with this person to come to a resolution. They just want this person to back off, and they're going to solve the problem themselves. Or they hope that the problem is going to go away, and the other person is going to forgive them or just going to let it go. Okay? They are sometimes highly impulsive, and they're quite quick with emotional reactions. So they tend to feel also certain extreme responses within themselves when a situation happens. Even if they recognize somebody is going to be upset at them, they feel an extreme sense of anxiety or an extreme fear of the confrontation, and it's very, very quick. They don't necessarily pause to think things through in a more balanced way. And lastly, they tend to avoid too much emotional closeness with others. So they do hold people a bit at bay. They don't necessarily get too attached. So they may even be in a relationship. They may be married, but they're not necessarily going to wholly and fully connect with their partner and open themselves up to their partner in the relationship. Again, it's just as a means of protecting themselves and protecting the inside, protecting their self-esteem on the inside, their sense of who they are, protecting the identity on the inside.
All right. So you spoke about recognizing defensive behavior, etc. And I actually wanted to ask you about one's childhood history, and you've already mentioned that. Now, how do you talk to a person who is constantly dismissive?
Okay. So, like I said earlier, the first thing is don't say you're getting defensive or point out the person's behavior. If you are dealing with a person who is defensive, and you often find this also in the work environment, because we are a bit more restrained in the work environment, we are a bit more conscious of our words and the impact it will have on others. So when we're picking up that the person we're having an issue with is becoming a bit defensive, the best thing you can do also is to maintain your cool and to maintain your calmness. Okay, because if both of you are becoming defensive, you're not really going to get anywhere, and chances are there's going to be highly repressed emotions on both sides. Okay, so we do recommend that you, as the person who's recognizing it, we recommend that you actually you take some time out. Remember, the person is being defensive, they immediately jumped to this inherent behavior within them. So the best thing you can do is actually to take some time out. Even if you have to say, I'm not sure how to respond to this right now. Give me a minute to think about this, or give me some time out and let's discuss this a little bit in a more constructive way. The main thing is to take some time out, and then contain yourself, and then come back to the person. Okay, so that's one of the conflict resolution. However, it's something also that long term you would have to address, especially if it's a partner, it's somebody you're living with. It's something that you would have to address with them. However, it has to be when you yourself are in a state of balance, a state of control, so that it doesn't get out of control emotionally. Recognize also that this is what the person knows best. So therapy is something that can really, really help the person overcome these instant responses to um, to any identified threat. So as a person, then also recognize what are they saying. You don't also try and get caught in the power struggle. So pay very close attention to the words that are being used, the person's use, what type of a defense mechanism are they using right now? If, for example, are they being absolutely in denial? They refuse to recognize the reality of the situation. You can then present certain facts in a very calm way and point it out that these are the facts, because oftentimes people who are in denial, they don't really recognize what what's not tangible. So something that is abstract, like emotions. If you speak about how you're feeling about a certain situation, they may then try to talk you out of how you are feeling about the situation. That is also why quite a few therapists also link defense mechanisms to gaslighting. Gaslighting is when you put the problem back on the other person, and you point it out to them that there is no problem and everything lies then with them. So it's almost a form of manipulation. So when we employ certain defense mechanisms, we actually can become quite manipulative to try and push it back to the people, back to the person who's confronting us that there's no problem and it's all in your mind. You are the one who's imagining. That is why people who use defense, who have maladaptive defense mechanisms, they tend to respond rather well to more facts rather than something that they cannot see, something that they cannot touch. The defense mechanism of rationalization. If you speak about how you feel about a certain thing, they just try to talk you out of how you feel about it. So it works best with facts and something tangible, and also recognizing that what they are using is a defense mechanism. So you need to recognize that it's not that you need to change what you are doing. If you felt a certain way, if you felt highly upset about a certain behavior, you're not necessarily wrong to feel that way. It's not for you to change how you feel about it, because if you felt a certain way about whatever had happened, then that is how you felt. And you need to then also have a little bit of self-talk within yourself that you are entitled to feel how you are, you're entitled to feel how you do, and the person is employing defense mechanisms, they're not entitled to change how you feel. So it requires also quite a bit of self-talk and some positive pep talk to yourself before you even get into addressing the actual issue that you are talking to the person who's using defense mechanisms about. But it's also very difficult to change just through your own. So we do again recommend some form of counseling to get to the root of why you have these certain mechanisms. Why are you employing these behaviors? And then how can we bring about this change? Is that it's ongoing. It's time. It takes some time to bring about behavior change. It's also helping people learn now something called adaptive mechanisms. So what can they utilize instead of these maladaptive defense mechanisms? And once we then bring about that change, and it's also a matter of then ongoing, continuous implementation of the new behaviors that are helping you to function optimally. And then we will then be able to sort of overcome the desire to, just utilize the defensive mechanisms that are maladaptive. Some defensive mechanisms are actually quite good for a certain period of time. They can help you overcome certain difficulties in the moment. So, for example, people who have experienced a sudden trauma, if somebody has passed on, for example, a loved one has just died, but there's a lot of things that need to be done in the immediate aftermath. For example, if it's a car accident, then there's things that need to be done, things that need to be arranged, maybe, getting the family to safety, getting everything together, matters like that. And so that's almost a little bit of not focusing on the actual grief that you are experiencing right now in the loss, because you're just containing the situation and then allowing yourself a little bit of time to contain the situation and then focusing on the loss and the grief that you had experienced. So it can help in terms of preservation, but it's not beneficial in the long run.
All right. Now, quickly, with the little time that we have, how can you recognize defensive behavior in yourself? I mean, sometimes when people tell us that you're being defensive and, or we don't look at it as though we are being defensive. It's like, you know what, I'm just trying to share my side of things, and I want to give my point of view. So how am I being defensive, and how do you recognize it?
Okay. So, look, usually a lot of these defensive behaviors come with quite a bit of anxiety on the inside. So, reflect on your emotions. I said earlier that they tend not to really focus on emotions. So, recognize also what, if there are difficult feelings associated with anything, that the defense that brings up the defense mechanism. So, if, for example, just reflect on the idea of confrontation. Reflect on the idea of criticism. It's a lot of self-reflection as a first step. So if you reflect on the idea of somebody sort of threatening your sense of balance, or threatening the idea of who you are, or somebody even questioning you, not even necessarily in a difficult way, but somebody questioning you about a certain idea that you hold about yourself. Reflect also on some of your motivations behind certain behaviors. For example, I said the one of where people may experience certain aggressive urges and they then focus on doing more physical exercise. Reflect on your motivation behind your behaviors also, behind your social interactions. Reflect on your relationship with others. Do you truly feel that you are close enough to people? Do you truly feel that people connect with you? Or do you feel that there's a little bit of a wall between your loved ones, people that know who you are? So a lot of it starts with reflection. And then it's a little bit difficult for trying to view a situation objectively. One little trick that we use in counseling to help people view things objectively is to almost imagine that they're watching the scene in a movie, and then to describe what the two people are doing in the situation. So if, for example, a couple are arguing, then having them describe what is going on in the scene that they see. So they take themselves out of the situation, and they are now just a narrator. Okay, so sometimes it helps people recognize the true essence of the situation when they're able to describe it from the outside, and then also to help them describe what is person A feeling, what is person B feeling, what is that person truly saying. Okay, so it's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of examination, a lot of identifying feelings. And because people are not used to really identifying their feelings, we actually go back to learn basic types of emotions. You know, we even use little face cards, your emojis, to show people reflecting gladness, reflecting how does excitedness look, helping people learn to identify emotions. And this is also a parenting trick that you can also use with your children in the beginning, helping them identify the emotions, which will then help them express it, because you can't really express what you can't really describe and what you don't understand. So we take people quite a bit back, because like I said earlier, we do understand that most therapists do believe that defense mechanisms develop in childhood. So we want to go back there and help you then resolve that, and empower you in terms of your emotions. And then we take it forward from there to bring about behavior change.
All right, Shuhaida, that's all the time that we have today, unfortunately. But inshallah, we will catch up with you soon once again.
Inshallah, for sure. Take care. And if anyone has any further information they'd like to know about regarding our topic, they can contact us on 011-373-8080, inshallah.
All right, shukran. Have a wonderful day. Assalamu alaikum.
Likewise. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A social worker from Islamic Careline, Shuhaida Adam, taking us through defensive behavior, what it is and how to recognize it. And if you have any social issues, counseling that you would require assistance with, you can call Islamic Careline on 011-373-8080. That's 011-373-8080. You are listening to the Mid Morning Talk on